Okay. Uh, I think we can get started. So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. This webinar is conducted by Happy to Help group, and Happy to Help group is nothing but a mentoring platform where we find mentors for multiple topics apart from academics as well. So, it consists of vast topics which we will try to cover at the end of the session. So the topic for today is basically art and science of photography, and our speaker today is Mr. Atul. About Mr. Atul, Mr. Atul is an IT professional who took up photography as a hobby in 2004, way back. That over years he turned it into a passion. And he is an avid traveler and uses his photography skills to captivate experiences that he can later share with the family and friends back home. We have also seen a lot of photos by him. He has currently started Alt Images Photography Studios and is conducting webinar to share some tips and tricks that helped him along the journey. So basically, this will help for the beginners as well as for the people who are pursuing at their passion in photography. So thank you Atul for conducting this seminar for us. Also, we have a privilege and we are lucky to have him as one of the founders of Happy to Help mentoring platform. Thank you, Atul. So, yeah, over to you.
Thanks, Ganesh. I hope you're able to hear my voice, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Thanks, Ganesh. Thanks for the introduction. So we'll quickly get started. So normally I divide this into two sections. Uh, so the second section is more of the technique and the science. So what I want to cover today in the next 1 hour or so is essentially how to take better photographs and look at photographs slightly differently from what you might be doing currently. And what I'm not really going to cover is camera buying advice. I'm not going to cover, what is the best camera to buy, or what is DSLR, or any of the really, really technical photography stuff. I'm going to try and keep this at a level where whatever gear you have today, maybe it's your cell phone, it's your DSLR, or it's an old, point and shoot camera. Uh, I'm trying to see if I can give you a perspective as to, how to maybe take slightly better photos and look at the pictures that you see in your daily life slightly differently. So that's basically the agenda. Uh, while we are at it, I would like people to ask questions, and it would be good if you guys can on the chat window kind of put in like how many of you have been pursuing photography as a hobby, and or maybe you can just type in hobby, and if there is anybody who is professional at it, you can type in professional. And if you are just looking to maybe elevate your photography game slightly, take slightly better photos of family and friends, maybe say you are an enthusiast, right? I mean, so if you could maybe put that in the chat window, I can get an idea of the audience that is in. That would be great. Right. So I think maybe just keep going, and I don't want to wait too much. But if you guys can continue typing in, that would be great, so I understand what the level is. Uh, so essentially, what I'm going to cover today is something known as framing. It is essentially going to deal with how do you compose a photo. And I see Rose saying that she wants to pursue this as a profession. So maybe this is too basic for somebody at that level, but I'll try to include some things during the next 40-45 minutes, which maybe you've not heard of, or some food for thought. But essentially, what I'm going to cover in the next 10 odd slides are basic composition techniques that anybody who is taking any kind of photo should really know. So let's take a look at one of these photos. So maybe if you guys can go on unmute yourself, or you can use the chat window. So look at this photo, right? And I would could somebody like add some adjectives on like what is the mood it conveys, what do you think is happening, something to that effect. Maybe somebody can unmute themselves, or if you prefer to type, that's also fine.
It's more of conveying nature, landscape.
Yes. So let me tell you what I see when I look at this picture. I taken this almost 3 years back. This is like it was really, really cold. We were about to start a trek. I wanted to convey a bit of that weather, that it is cold. It was freezing. I wanted to convey a bit of the the expanse that we had in terms of like how insignificantly small human beings were against that those mountains. That's essentially what I wanted to convey. And 3 years after I've taken this photo, when I look at it, I still kind of, I personally am able to feel what I felt then. And that was essentially the aim, I feel, of a lot of people who take photographs, that they want to look at it and go back to the time when they actually took the photo, right? So yes, it is a landscape, but adding to the landscape part to it, there were some emotions that I wanted to convey with it, right? So now there are some things that make this photograph, convey that. So I wanted to kind of have that conversation in the context of framing. And there are some issues with it. I will get to that also when we discuss this in slightly more detail. So if I look at how this photograph is framed, right? So it's basically, and I would encourage you, and this is something that you learn, like the first thing that you maybe learn about composition is something known as the rule of thirds. Typically, when you look at landscape photography and when you want to just take a picture of somebody who is maybe standing on top of a hill, or or this valley right here, the tendency is to, I would say, put the object somewhere here in center, and then kind of have the entire thing, and just take a photo, right? I mean, so here I am and take a photo, right? I mean, that's the typical tendency. So one of the rules that you can experiment with is called the rule of thirds. What it means. I think. Sorry. So that was not me. That was my mother.
Yeah.
No problem.
Sure.
So yeah. So typically, what you do is you have somebody stand here, and you go like, right, take a photo of me, right? I mean, that's the first kind of thing that you want to do. So the rule of third kind of states that move the subject, right? In this case, these two people, move them off center. What it will help you do is take the viewer of the image through the photo, and it will help you not just focus on this thing here, but also kind of help the viewer kind of look at the entire photo and kind of grasp what is happening. So that is one like a very primary basic rule that you might want to start experimenting with, that start placing objects off center and see if that helps you kind of change how the photograph slightly looks. Some of the other things here is to have a foreground subject and having a, something on the background, and then obviously something on the infinity here. What this is helping you do is add some depth to the photo. So if, for example, I did not have these people here, what would have essentially happened is it would have been a barren photo of the landscape. And if that were the look I was going for, then that's fine. But essentially have a foreground subject. Typically, we would have it if we are on a holiday with friends, family, etc. And then try to build a more 3D view of the scene. Now, some of the things that didn't go well with this picture, right? So one is on the top right there, right? I should have taken a step back, really. and got the entire peak in. So what one of the things that you really need to look at when you're taking a picture is what all is in your frame, right? So when you look through that cell phone or the the viewfinder of your camera, look at the edges. Make sure you're not cutting off things that should be in the frame. So it would have been a much better picture if I could get the entire peak and not have cropped that off from there. Now that I show this to you, I hope you also kind of agree that that's an issue. And so what I want you to do is not like nitpick this photo, but to kind of start incorporating these thoughts when you take a photo. And the other thing, slightly more technical, is the editing here. There's a slight vignette if you look at it on really high definition screens. You won't see them on Instagram and those kind of media. But if you look at it, if you take a print or if you take a really high def screen, you will see some of the editing was shoddy from my end, so I should not have done that. But again, that's not something you really need to worry about to start off with. The one takeaway or the two takeaways I would have from this particular image is try to keep stuff off center, experiment with that, and don't clip off things that you want to have in the image. I hope that kind of makes sense. Any questions on that?
No, makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. So just for the nerds and all the engineers, I know some of you are, right? So does anybody recognize this series here?
Yes, Atul.
Fibonacci?
Yeah, so this is the Fibonacci series, right? And there are a lot of engineering or software engineering questions and interviews around it, right? So for those of you who are not aware of it, it is basically the sum of the two digits from the next digit, and it keeps going. What I would like you to do, and I don't want to take too much time on this right now, is to start dividing, this number with this number. So 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. And as you keep going, right, it will reach to a number which is known as the golden ratio, God's number. It is referred to as a lot of things. If you've seen the movie Da Vinci Code, it gets referred there quite a bit. It is this ratio of 1 is to 1.6103. You can Google it. There might be some decimals that I'm missing here. So essentially what it is saying is most things in nature are composed by God in this ratio. So from the Milky Way to the petals, to the human ear, to shells that you see in the sea, to the pattern that wave makes, they're all in a way composed by God in this ratio. So if you're a believer in those kind of things, it is something that is ingrained into human beings to kind of look and appreciate. So something to think about. Essentially what that means is if you have a rectangle, which is your frame, this distance and this distance, right? So if you divide them, they should be in this ratio, 1 is to 1.3, and that takes us back to the rule of third, where you kind of put everything on the intersection of these lines. So that if you divide this distance and then this distance, it will take you to the golden number, golden ratio. The other point I would quickly touch upon is something known as hyperfocal distance. Again, I don't want to really complicate it, but to give you a view, something to Google is to understand how do I ensure that everything from my subject to infinity is in focus. And there is a technique known as hyperfocal distance. There are apps available to do this calculation, or there are some approximations. I don't want to get into it right now, given the audience, but have a look at it. Not really critical, but what I would suggest as a takeaway from this slide is that try to keep things off center, see how that makes your photo look, and yeah, so, and take it from there. There are some things on the slide that you could later on see if you want to kind of experiment with. The next photo, right? And this is what I'm going to do throughout. So I'm going to show you some photos and I'm going to ask you for some questions on what you think about them and what could have been done better with them. So again, we will get to some portraits as we go along. But do you guys see anything specifically wrong with this photo? Given maybe some of the things we discussed in terms of clipping the corners or something like that. That's a very obvious hint though.
The sky covers too much of the photograph.
Yeah.
Should be less.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let me look at this. So this was the original photo. So if you look at it, Ranil, your point is valid, but I would counter that by saying that was a choice that I made to compose it this way. But what I really wanted to kind of bring to your attention is that the horizon was tilted in this photo. So if you look at how the zebra is, right, because the horizon is really, really complicated here. There are the tree cover, then there are these the plains finishing, and then there are the mountains, and then there is this line that the clouds form. It's complicated. But if you look at the wildebeest, then you realize that the photo was tilted, right? So this is another very common mistake that people make when they're taking photos because they're really excited with the sunset or really excited of how pretty the hotel is or the beach is, that they want to just capture that moment, right? So look at your horizon, look at your edges. So if you look at this picture, right, I had cropped off the wildebeest head here. So look at the horizon, look at the edges, make sure you're not cropping off things you don't want to crop off. Make sure that the horizon is straight. Because if the horizon is not straight, there is going to be something wrong with it. You may not be able to pinpoint and say what it is, right? So that's another element to think about. So make sure if you're taking landscape or if the horizon is visible in your photograph. So beaches, mountains, plains like these, make sure the horizon is straight, right? I mean, think about it, right? Yeah, and I will take that criticism of the sky, but I kind of liked it, so I framed it like that. But anyway, so any questions on the horizon though? I mean, it's a quite straightforward, I would say, tip, but something that we often see the horizon is not looked at and it's tilted. Any specific questions on that? Okay. The other concept, so we covered rule of thirds, we covered the horizon being straight. The other concept I would like you to start experimenting with and try to start seeing in more and more photos that you see published is a concept called as leading lines, right? So what is a leading line? So if you take the photo of this cow, right? So that's obviously the subject of this picture, right? And this monument is the subject of this picture, and yeah, so some of my colleagues here are the subject of this picture, right? The leading line is that you try to find some naturally occurring line in the picture which helps you kind of take your eye to where the subjects are. So it need not be a physical line. Sometimes you will find fences there. Sometimes it might be a wave. Sometimes it might be a physical line in the sand. But it could be light. It could be train tracks. It could be, ropes. It could be some pattern that has formed somewhere. So look for those lines which could help you kind of guide your, viewer to the subject. So it, one, adds depth. Two, it will allow your, viewer to look at that image and say that this is what the, photographer or whoever it was, this is what he wanted to show, right? And take you to that image, right? So, so this is another technique that you could start incorporating. You will see this used quite a bit in portraits where somebody is leaning against a wall and then, the wall is kind of blurred and then you have the face coming up, but you kind of let your eye run across the wall to the face, right? So look for this when you see other pictures. You might see, I'm hoping post this call, you see these composition techniques in pictures that you're seeing very frequently, and you also start incorporating them. Does that make sense? Is this kind of clear of what a leading line is? Okay. So any specific question?
So this leading line slides, basically it's only we, I mean, like primarily we need to consider when we subject, when we especially taking the photo of subject, right?
Uh, Again, Neeraj, what I would say is that, the obvious answer is yes. I would say that yes, if you have a subject, it helps. If there is a leading line, it kind of gives a 3D effect. It takes the eye there. But all the things that I'm going to talk about, right, and what I spoke about are tools, right? Uh,
Okay.
so these are like having a screwdriver and a hammer and a spanner with you. Now, when you look at a photo, say for example, you're taking a photo of your kid, and you know there might be occasions when you want to do it, and there might be occasions when you don't want to do it. So if you end up with say 20 photos, all of them with leading lines, it might look very cliched and not what you want to do, right? But so think through that. Think through like when do you want to use it? And I think the more creative you get with the leading line, right? Like I said, it could be streaks of car lights, right? If it is a tail light streak, right? So there are some amazing pictures where that is used to kind of take you into the picture. So take for example in this case, right? It's not a person. It's it's twilight. It is this monument here. I don't want to mispronounce my French, so I'm not naming it. But uh, the lights have been used to kind of create that impression. So it is how you kind of interpret leading lines and do it, which will make that photo pop. Don't overdo it. Don't you should not open one folder of images and see that all of them have leading lines, right? I mean, that's not the idea here. But know that this is an option that you can use.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other question on this? Okay. Right. So another set of three pictures. What I wanted to cover here, right, with this first picture, again, is if you notice the hands of this person, right, they are abnormally large, right? And it's not that he has huge hands. What you need to understand and know is that whatever you keep closest to the camera's lens is going to be huge, right? So if you're going to start, say, take a selfie with the phone right, press right against your face is going to. So the further away you step, the more slimming the lens will start making you look. So in this case, because I was sitting right next to him and I took this image, the hands are extremely large compared to how his face is. So in fact, I mean, they would probably be the same size in this image, which is not the case. So try to see what are you keeping closest to the lens. So if you are taking somebody's portrait and you don't want them to look abnormally large, take a step back, right? That will help you kind of slim them down. Similarly, if you are in a groupie and you are the closest to the lens, you are going to look humongously large. So compared to the others who are all looking slim and trim. So look at where you stand in a groupie also. But anyway, my point really is that look at what is closest to the lens. That's going to look really, really large. So make sure you know what's going to happen when you click that picture. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Let's do that.
Right. The other two pictures, there are, I mean, some things to be said about it. But what I really wanted to say is that if you are taking pictures, right, and we tend to normally take pictures at eye level, we kind of hold up the cell phone or the camera at our eye level and take a picture. That is how we see the world. There is nothing wrong with it. That is how, that at some, say, 108-degree angle or something is what we see the world as. If you change that perspective, it gives a very different story to the picture. So if you are shooting down to up, it kind of makes everything look larger, and it will make things look more I would say in command and stronger. So if, for example, you want to, if you maybe look at some of the posters of action movies, etc., you might have seen the photos being shot from a very low angle to the upwards, where the hero looks huge and he looks like he can save everybody in the movie, right? So that's a technique, right? So understand that that's a technique. Again, I've used some leading lines here to take you to the top, right? So another example of how you could use a leading line. But essentially, the trees are looking menacing. The trees are looking dramatic because of this angle. Had I been taking this photo at eye level, it would have been an okay picture, but you would not get this view of how, massive the scale of the tree is and how intimidating they look, right? So that's the view that you will get if you're shooting from bottom to top. Now, the other way around, where you shoot from top to bottom, right? This is like a God's view, right? This will kind of detach you from what the picture is, right? So again, these were people I was trekking with. I had to climb up somewhere to take this picture. It gives you the perspective, it detaches you from the image as a photographer, and it kind of puts you in, like how God would be looking at it, right? So it gives you a very different perspective to what would have happened if I were shooting down to up, right? So use both of them and understand like what is going to happen to your image when you shoot from a very low angle, or if you shoot from a height and shoot downwards. I hope that kind of made sense, and both the images kind of depict what I'm trying to convey, I'm assuming.
Yes.
All right. Far on all the things, on rule of thirds, on the tilted horizon, on what else did we cover? The leading lines, and then the perspective, and like how it gets distorted based on where the camera is. Guys, you need to ask questions. I don't have too many slides. You won't reach 8 o'clock this way.
Okay. So, Atul, I've got probably a naive question. Okay. Where is the camera in the second image? That's something that I was trying to grapple with.
Okay, so essentially, I am standing somewhere here, Shobit, right?
Okay.
And this is like a small break in the mountain, and there is a road here somewhere.
Okay.
Right, and I've kind of climbed up till wherever I could, and then I'm shooting upwards.
Okay. And the second question, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. I was thinking it's probably there's a trench or something from where you or a ditch.
I can't afford that many.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So probably the second question that I had was look again probably a naivety driven question. In probably the first and the second image, right? The rule of third is not. Is
followed?
Intentionally not being enforced, or how is
so
it?
let me get to that.
Okay.
Right? Let me get to that. So in a way, so again, I mean, that was one of my slides, but since you're being all mysterious and naive about it, I will explain. There is something known as the rule of 5/8 also, right? And so if you look at a lot of the Renaissance paintings, they actually follow that. They don't need to be essentially rule of third. But I will get to it. I think it might be too much for this right now.
No problem.
I don't want to make it sound like you need to start measuring each frame and start taking photos. That's not the aim, right? The aim really is, if there is an image and third, use the rule of third, right? Like for example, this image, right? say for example, I wanted to pose them somewhere. Say I wanted them to come here, right? That was not happening, right? I was very far away. This was when I reached on the top. They would have been here if I had reached 5 minutes slower. They would have gone away if I were 10 minutes slower, right? So you would not always get to do, like start posing people. But I will kind of get to that also on the rule of third, and when you could maybe just break them, right?
Yep. Thank you.
Sorry, any other questions on this quickly, and then I can move on? I was joking about the slides. I have a lot of slides. So let's go to the next one. So the next composition element, right? And it is not maybe traditionally considered as a composition element in terms of where you are placing things in an image, right? But it does play a really, really important part in your image is the, I would say, the color and contrast that is there in the image, right? So again, I hope everybody is with me till now. We are not discussing anything which is, very camera specific, or, like you need a DSLR to do this kind of conversations, right? All of them, anybody should be able to apply in the next photo that you guys take, right? At least start thinking through it. So think through again, when do you do black and white and when do you do color? Anybody has any opinions?
I don't think there's kind of an occasion. It's depending on the photographer if he really wants to do
yes.
Like a vintage look in case he wants to do a photograph.
Yes. So obviously one is like Subodh just said, the black and white or a sepia image will make the image look more vintage. You might want to add some grain, add some drama, right? That's obviously one, right? But let me present to you this specific image, right? The two, exactly the same image. I have just used PowerPoint to put this in grayscale. I have not edited anything else on this. I would put to you that the image on the right, if I were to show you in relation, it will take you some time to quickly figure out that it is a kingfisher. The image on the left, moment you see the blue colors, you will say, yes, it's a kingfisher. Would you agree to that? So color, like I said, is part of composition, right? So some things you will look at color and, that color is what kind of defines that thing, right? So, so if you desaturate that, unless that is the style you're going for, like Subodh said, right? I mean, it's completely a photographer's choice. If you desaturate that, it might throw the viewer off, right? And it may not, he may not pick up what's happening. So think through that. Is that the effect you want, right? If that is the effect you want, go for it, make it black and white. But if that is not the effect you want, and there is some specific color that really, really, is what your image is, right? Then, or your subject is, then don't desaturate it, because then it kind of adds more confusion to the frame. And as a photographer, essentially what you want to do is, there's a saying that photography is a lie, right? It is more about what you are not showing than what you are showing, right? There is a gutter right behind this kingfisher, right? I'm not showing you that, right? So think about how do you simplify it, right? So maybe removing color helps, maybe adding color simplifies it, right? So that's an element to think about. Does that make sense from a color perspective to Subodh, and anybody else has any view on color? Okay. The other thing that I wanted to, again, on the color aspect, right? Color does one more thing. So if you look at these, both of them again are the same photos. I've not edited it in any professional software. I've just copied it onto PowerPoint and used grayscale here. This is, I had taken this during one of the Ganesh Visarjan, occasions when people could still, be close to each other. Now the first image, right? What I wanted to convey was the kind of it's not a sharp image, right? I mean, I'd used a slow shutter to do it, but what I want to discuss more than the technique was the mood that I wanted to convey. I wanted to convey, like people dancing, people having a really great time, the motion that was happening at that point of time, and me being right in the center of that, right? That is what I wanted to convey. And the color, I feel, adds some amount of, for a lack of a better word, a party vibe or a happy vibe to it. Moment I drain the color out, right? What happens, right? What do you see? Now you suddenly start seeing all the details and the lines are more clearer. You kind of see the shapes better. So that is another thing that you need to consider. So if you have something which has a lot of texture in it, right? Maybe like in this case, you want to really focus on the hair that is there, right? Or the beak and the, like the small imperfections in the beak, right? Or if you have a very colorful flower and if you desaturate that flower, the focus will immediately shift to the texture and the structure. So if that is what you want from your image, right? You want your user to look at the contrast, you want your user to look at the texture and the structure of an image, use black and white. Otherwise, we see things in color, use color, right? So it's about the story you want to tell, right? Whether black and white fits scene or whether color fits that scene, right? So there is no one right answer that shoot everything in black and white and you'll be a great photographer. I mean, it doesn't work like that. So, and by no means am I saying these photos are great. I just want to use them as examples of what happens when you remove color from a photo. So if that is the effect you want, then do it. And like Subodh said, also it gives you a more retro pensive feel when you remove color, right? So if you look at, say, the middle photo here, not really black and white. I've left some greens in here, some yellows in here. If you have a really contrasty screen, you would see it. This in color, like say bright, oranges and greens everywhere, would have been a very different to what it is right now. So just focus. Also think about what aspect of your photo, like how does the color of a photo impacts, right? So does that make sense for the color part of it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's just quickly. I know I'm now like the end straight, so just I'll quickly go through this. I wanted to do a more dramatic entrance, but since I'm running short on time, right? So on portraits, right? And this is like, I think the most commonly taken photo, right? I mean, you take photos of people you like, people you see on the street. So what are the things that you can look for and what are the things you can kind of tweak when you take portraits, right? So the thing I want to emphasize, and once you start your journey trying to look through photographs, is the eye essentially is the most important element of any portrait image that you shoot, right? So a dead black eye like the image here, or an eye which is closed. You would have all had images where somebody's eyes are squinting, they're not looking at the camera, right? All those pictures take something away from what the portrait is. So try to get eye in focus, make sure there is some light reflecting off the eye. Maybe it is about shifting your own perspective where you are standing or asking whoever it is to move a bit. So you get something in the eye which gives you that, twinkle in the eye, right? It will help the photo come alive a bit. The other element, and I would really encourage you to start looking at photographs going forward critically, is a lot of portrait work. You will see that the top of the head is cropped off. Okay, maybe it is not something many of us notice, but if you will look at a lot of the portraits, especially headshots, the top of the head is cropped off. The reason that is because if you look at this image, right, with me cropping off the top, is that it lends you to kind of get into the face and give emphasis on the face, and you start seeing the details of the face. So, so if you have some space on top, you can make the decision to crop it off, and it breaks the rule that I first said of edges. The top of the head is fair game. Go for it if you want to. The other mistake I obviously made is, I cropped off his hands from here, right? This is not natural to look at. This is not how you see people. It is distracting. Either take it completely away, like I've done now here, or include them, right? And hands are typically troublemakers in portrait photography, but don't crop off limbs of people. It's not a good look for most people. So quickly, just following up on this. This is a very, I took permission to show this photo from a friend. So this is a very, normal picture that you take, right? I mean, this was taken on a speedboat. You have friends, you take photos, right? This is a very snapshotty photo, right? Not very artistic. But what I wanted to kind of cover in this, right? If the person is not looking at you, right? And so I was sitting opposite him on the boat and he's not looking at me. There is this concept of negative space, right? So this is negative space. This is negative space. Now that I've called it out, do you see how imbalanced the second photo looks with him looking away from the negative space into the frame? It looks. Do you agree?
Right.
So if somebody is not looking into the camera, it's a good idea to leave some negative space to where he is looking. It tells you a story of he might be looking at something interesting, maybe a dolphin, maybe a person, maybe something, right? Or maybe he's pensively looking at something and thinking about something. So it gives you that opportunity to leave negative space here. If you leave negative space here, it just seems unnatural, unless that is your style, right? And I'll come to that quickly about style and taking artistic liberties, right? The other thing I want you to notice is this pole jutting out of from his head, right? And this is a very, very common mistake most of us make. That we have these things we take a photo because somebody's standing and there is a light pole coming out of his head, or there is somebody's hand, because somebody was waving somewhere, so there is this phantom hand somewhere, right? All those things, right? Think about, like I said, what is on the edges of your photograph, right? In this case, I cropped off his specs, right? So think of those things. Don't include them. Like I said, photography is the art of not including most of the things. So try to either move or get the subject to move, or worst case scenario, clone it out in Photoshop or any of the editing tools that you want to use. But don't have things jutting out of people which don't have any context. Does that make sense?
Yep.
There is exposure issues here. I'm not dealing with that right now, but I have another slide for it. So, but negative space and strange things coming out of people are a big no-no. So have a look at how you use them. Yeah. Okay, so this is something we did for a client, I want to say. This was a pre-wedding shoot. What I want to kind of quickly discuss, right? I mean, there were a couple of technicalities. We used some equipment here, but I don't want to get into that. What I really want to discuss here is if you look at the shadows that are forming on, like here on the foreheads, right? What was happening is they were standing under a tree. It was, by the time we got to this place, it was 12 o'clock. The light was really bad. We decided to shoot in a shadow. When you stand under trees, there is going to be irregular lighting of your face, right? And it's all right. You could still take a photo, but it's just not going to look as good if you have evenly lit shadowless faces, right? So all we did here is to ask them to come and stand where the light, was more even. So it's exactly just 1 feet ahead. So if you look at it, it's slightly cropped closer because I was lazy and I didn't move, but essentially they moved a step ahead, and the light is more even now, right? And like I said, I'd use some other techniques I don't want to get in right now, but essentially to fix the light, all we did is to ask them to move a step ahead. So again, when you take a photo, don't just go and take the photo, think about it, look at what light you have, look at how is it falling on people's faces. Light like this, would not want to look at that photo again, right? So think through that. Does that make sense? It's an easy fix to kind of get the light right.
Nice trick.
Yes, Shubha.
So I'm not sure if it is my camera because I tested it out with my mobile and some other cameras
Yeah.
as well. Let's say I click a photo and I do have enough exposure. I mean, I normally avoid flash and I use natural lights.
Yeah.
But still, when I copy it on my laptop or a system, okay, I have to somehow modify my shadows, shadow settings
Yeah.
and exposure because
Yeah.
every photo that I take from my camera, I use a bridge camera, and
Okay.
every photo that I use has this some kind of black tint kind of thing, right? When
Yeah.
I create
Yeah.
the shadow, it kind of improves
Yeah.
the image
Agreed.
brightness overall.
Yes.
I'll have
Yeah.
to, and I have to do that for every bit of mine. Is that
Yeah.
because maybe
Can I do this, Subodh? Can we just, if you don't mind, if you like stay back for 5-10 minutes, like I just want to go through this so I don't like people who are not really into exposure compensation and those kind of things. I don't want to turn people off. Is that okay? Can we just pick this question? It's a very relevant question. It happens to most people. So can we just once I just quickly run through this?
no worries? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So again, these are another set of 3 pictures that I took, right? And these are more street pictures. They are not portraits that either of or any 3 of them would go and put on their Facebook or as a DP, right? I mean, they are not flattering in that sense, right? But what they are a reflection of what these people are. So if the first image is a fisherman, he's sitting on the sand. I've done some shouty touch-ups there, but like if you look at the wrinkles, he's not it gives you the feeling you have the sand on the collar, right? These are things that I would have removed typically, but it gives you the feeling of who he is, what he's up to, and and that was the image that I wanted to create, right? Similarly, in this case, all the hard work, all the sweating, the glow from the sweat, the sand, the fish, right? It's to take you there, right? I mean, there are technically issues of this hand. I would have liked to not have that. I would have liked to not have this guy here. But somehow I feel like with the face and the glow, the image works. Similarly, if, maybe I should have whitened the teeth if you're a friend of mine, but, a hardworking guy walking on the station doing some work, right? So there is a story. I hope the image kind of conveys that, right? So there is a place for this kind of photography also where you are kind of taking street and it is not essentially paid work for somebody unless somebody wants to do this. But there is a place for this. And then there is a place for something like this, right? This was, again, like I said, part of that pre-wedding shoot that we did. We still want to be slightly artistic. We want to kind of light stuff up. We want to add some blur somewhere, but we want people to look good, right? Because in the end, these are photos they want to use for their, look at it subsequently and say that, yeah, I mean, it was a fun day that day, right? So the rule here, right, is essentially, I would say, I have edited things here, obviously, right? I've edited the skin. I've kind of smoothened out stuff. I've added some light. I've done a lot of work here. But the rule that I will tell you here is that don't edit anything which is permanent. Okay. So for example, say Indrajit had a scar here, right? And it is part of his personality. It is who he is. For me to go in and edit that scar is highly disrespectful and don't do it. Right? So it holds true unless obviously somebody comes and tells me that please do remove it, right? I mean, that's a different conversation. So don't edit out anything permanent. So in this photo, for example, here, right? I have left it in. If this wound, which I feel might have healed in 2-3 days time, where in one of these pictures, I might have gone and edited it out. So what you want to do with a lot of your portrait work, if it is not the street variety, where you're communicating emotion and day in life, what you want to do is to make people look their best version, but don't make them look some other, weird Chinese version of themselves, right? And this holds true for a lot of cell phone filters, right? With elongated nose and elongated jaws, with big eyes, right? Don't change how people look. Try to get the best look that they have, right? I mean, like I said, the best version of what they are rather than trying to just materially alter who they are, right? I mean, people will not appreciate it. Does that make sense from purely what you want to convey in an image?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So, so quickly, right, to Shobit, your question and to a couple of other questions. I have another 5 minutes. So this is called the Dutch angle. Here the horizon is completely tilted, right? This is a valid technique. What I wanted to why I'm showing you this is to explain to you that all the rules I have said so far, they are essentially tools, right? Like I said, Neeraj, they're all tools that you know you can use. The Dutch angle is a tool. You know you can tilt the horizon if you want to. If it is what you want to do. If it looks like you by mistake tilted the horizon, it looks like a bad photo. But if it is a conscious effort that I wanted a tilted horizon, then it is a different type of photo. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Same is the case with the rule of third, right? Putting this dog dead in the center makes it look more powerful, right? And that was the kind of look that I wanted. So it is okay to put something dead in the center. Most headshots will be dead in the center. Like I said, there is a framing rule which will say that the eye, where the eye falls, right? And there is a rule that you could do, and the eye would fall in one of those things. But all the rules can be broken. Don't get stuck up that, oh, I need to do rule of third in all my pictures. That's not the point here. Don't do that. But all the rules can be broken. And it kind of brings me to this concept I really wanted to discuss in this call. I hope till now, whatever we have discussed, right? These are things agnostic of your gear, right? You could use them. A good way to start using them, if you're really interested, is to pick one and try to incorporate that for a month or two to get a handle of it, and then start using the others. So you kind of know how those are impacting your image. I hope till now what we have discussed is essentially non-technical, non-gear related. You could do it with a cell phone, you could do it with a bridge camera or a DSLR or a mirrorless or whatever you have, right? I hope that's what I was trying to at least convey. There is this concept called wabi-sabi, okay? It is about embracing imperfection. So it's about being transient. It is about, kind of looking at imperfection and embracing that, right? It is almost like seeking imperfection, trying to find imperfection and capturing that, right? So that's a Japanese lifestyle. So like I said, it's not about creating a perfect picture, unless obviously that is what you want to do. It is about communicating a mood, right? So in this picture, both of them are siblings. They are sharing a secret, right? And the emotion I wanted to create was about all siblings who have secrets with their, brother or sister, right? Which only they understand, right? So if it were a very clear picture, and it were a photo, like a journalistic picture with two people talking to each other, it would not maybe be universally convey that image, so look at also where you want to kind of capture imperfection and tell a story. So that's a thought, right? When you start doing this, is that family. We took a snapshot. Here we are, standing, and we're taking a snapshot, a typical snapshot. These are the two kids that are in this picture, right? So this is also a picture, right? And I'm not saying this is a bad picture. It's a picture that tells me that, yes, I was here. I stayed at their home. They were friendly people. This is a different type of picture. Both pictures exist. You could take both pictures with whatever gear you have. It's just about what do you want to convey and what do you want to capture, right? I mean, that's generally the thought. Other examples of things which are essentially wabi-sabi, right? It is this, blocks of trays which have rubber in it, not the most elegant, some imperfection in what's there. These rhinos in the morning, not the most perfect, noiseless image, but it conveys a feeling. There is story behind it. I know it. People who are there know it, right? Similarly with the coconut tree leaves, imperfection, decaying. So if you want to go down that route, right, of being artistic and trying to explore that, this is also an option that you could look at. Yeah. So just to come, finish this conversation off, and I'm very, like, I finished at 8 dot. Is this statement from Ansel Adams? I would really recommend you Google Ansel Adams. He was a landscape photographer in 1940s, one of the like pioneers in photography. He said that don't take a photograph, make it. Right? And whatever I've discussed till now is about the thought process you should have when you're taking a photo, right? It's not about going and taking a photo, just getting somebody to stand there, take a photo. It's about making that photo, right? How do you make that photo? So I would leave you with that and some of the Instagram handles that are there. There are some other slides, but I don't want to go through them. This was essentially the slides I wanted to cover. Any questions?
Yeah, Atul, my question is, if I'm using my mobile, then how I can, I mean, I'm not even beginner, so, I mean, what tips do you have for me?
So, okay, I think I will need to go back to slide 1 and start home. But essentially, like I said, right, none of what I said has anything to do with whether you're shooting with a mobile on full auto or whether you're using a DSLR, right? So take, for example, capturing color, say, like the light in somebody's eyes when you're shooting, right? So when you're shooting with your mobile, think about it, right? That's the point, right? I mean, don't get in and say, oh, I need to take a photo and take a photo. Think about what you want to take.
Right.
And that's what I have right now listed are tools that you can use, right? So do I want to take a photo of a CEO of a company showing, how muscular and powerful and in control he is? Maybe I will shoot down to up, right? If I want to show some kids who are playing and I want to kind of capture that moment, maybe I will go up, climb up somewhere and shoot from there, right? So think about that. So that's, I think, what I want to kind of convey. All the tools that are there in the deck are essentially, it doesn't matter what you have, right? It doesn't matter. In fact, most of them apply for painting also. So if you're going to paint, most of these apply there also. So it's not about what you have in your hand. You could use a mobile. You could, once you want to explore further in section 2 of this deck, we have more techniques in terms of like what are various techniques. But most of it is about how do you see that picture, right? What is the picture that you see even before you click it, right? And then take that picture.
Got it.
Okay.
But to start off with, yeah, sorry, Ganesh. Go ahead.
Sorry, Atul, I just wanted to bring your attention to, there is one question from Ruba in the chat. You might want to take after answering Holmes' question.
Okay.
The question is, she just began and asking for a suggestion on the best courses or training.
I have included some links here. So this deck will get shared to you. I have included this. The first one, Photography Life, has like an index. It takes you through composition, all the basics of your camera, all those things. If you are interested, this channel is again quite interesting. They have books available here, and Flern is essentially paid, but for a lot of editing and those kind of work, Flern really works. So I have put some links here. We will share this link deck out, Ruba. So if you want, you can go through it. There is also a section, part 2 of this, where I like detail out some of the basics of photography, right? So if we happen to do that, do join. I'll take you through some of the basics of how a camera works. What is shutter speed, what is ISO, what is white balance, how do you focus, those kind of things. I will do that in subsequent session.
Yeah, follow-up session would really help.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other question? No question on which camera to buy?
Rather, people would ask which phone to buy, Atul.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, if I were to look at cell phones, and if I were to, I mean, I have this slide, but I don't want to really take too much time. You can go through this. If you are in any of those orange categories, right, get any cell phone camera, invest in a good cell phone camera. If it supports RAW, that's a good thing. If it supports Google camera, that's a good thing. If it has some optical zoom, that's a good thing. But essentially for all people in this section, stick to the cell phone. I would say this section, stick to something which is like a bridge camera, which gives you some reach without being too expensive. And then this is a completely different ballgame. If you're really, really into it as a hobby, then buy the cheapest camera, cheapest DSLR you can, buy a second-hand DSLR, start from there, and then see where it takes you. But yeah, I mean, I would say camera raw. I would look for something that supports camera raw, raw images, and I would say something which supports Google camera. Those are, I think, I would say the suggestions. Anything that kind of supports pro mode or manual mode, that is what you want to look at. There are apps which will enable it for some cameras. So something like Lightroom from Adobe will enable pro mode in any phone. So you could just use that. What you should not do is apply random filters on images and be not in control of what you're shooting. Okay. I think.
Can you
Subodh.
cover my question because I need to run?
Sure, Subodh. So, all right. So, could you just repeat that? Are you saying your images are typically dark? Is that the issue?
Yeah, right. So typically dark in sense. Let's say I take a photo and yeah, for example, the portrait that you click now. For example, on the left side, right?
Yes.
Below the eyes or below the neck, the shadows
Yes.
come. The photo
Yes.
appears to be a bit dark. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's why I have to increase the shadow level.
Yeah.
And exposure
Yeah.
to get that
Yeah.
clean.
Yeah. So two things, right? Again, okay. Do you understand?
Not much.
Okay. Okay. So basically, your camera has a meter, Subodh. So which camera can I ask? Which one are you using?
It's a Sony HX100V. It's a bridge camera.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So if you go through the manual, right, there would be some metering modes in that camera. So all cameras, which are especially bridge cameras onwards, would have it. So what does the camera do, right? It has a meter in it. It will reflect light on this scene and kind of read what the exposure should be. So for example, if I were to take this image, say take this image, right? It will say, for example, this is 10 lumens. Again, I'm just completely making this up. This is 1 lumen. This is, say, 5, right? From a brightness perspective, and this is 3. So what will the camera do, right? Let me make this 2 for so that I can divide this easily, right? So camera is going to add all this up. Okay, so it is going to say 10 plus 3 plus 5 plus 2, 20, 20 divided by 4, 5. So I need to expose for lumen 5. This is what typically the camera does, right? So this is called as evaluating metering. The cell phones are increasingly getting better at it. They are able to identify faces. They are able to identify eyes, and they will expose better for them, right? Obviously. But essentially, this is the basics of it. The camera has a meter. It will look at the entire scene and say what is what degree of brightness, and accordingly expose. So it says 5. Now, what is the issue with this number 5, right? So this was supposed to be 10. This will also be 5. This was supposed to be 2. This will also be 5, right? And this was supposed to be 5. So this is perfectly fine, and this will be a white shirt. So that is why when you have like like this image with shadows here, what has happened is this would have ideally, should have been a 10, but the camera made it a 5. And that's why you see the shadows in it. Right? So that is called an evaluative metering. It has a symbol like this with a lot of dots in it. That is how it typically shows up on one of the menus. There is something known as spot metering. Okay, it looks something like this. You can Google it, obviously. What it will do is it will pick one of the focusing points of your camera to do the metering. So for example, if you decide that the bride is the most important point and the groom doesn't matter, right? You could put the spot right here. Okay. And the camera will then evaluate the under eye. So in this case, for example, the under eye, say 3, and the camera thinks it should be a 5, overexpose it and get your shadows removed, right? But it also has a problem. Again, like I said, if you get into it, so it's basically what have you done? You have exposed for this. Now this was dark, so this is now correctly exposed, but say something like this, his shirt, which were supposed to be 5, are now going to be 10 because that's what happened. So this will blow out, right? So that is why, so if you have something very backlit, it helps to spot meter. So you basically put the meter, point the meter to the dark area or whatever you want to be exposed perfectly, and take that photo. So if you look at this photo, this was spot metered, right? So his face is in focus. This is kind of washed out. Yeah. Where a flash will help you is like this picture, right? I had taken this with a flash and a reflector. So I had exposed for this, right? So I had exposed for this area here. So I could get the greens, right? I didn't want to make it a completely white background. I wanted the green in there. And I used the flash to expose for the face. Okay, so that's why I could get a very clean image. But if you're not doing that and you're using natural light, so 2 tips: use spot metering, see how that helps. Use the diffused light, right? So if it is a window or some light which is getting diffused because of clouds, right? Diffused light will spread. Okay, and what will happen is that will kind of uniformly light it. Whereas a very directional light, say a light from a bulb, it will not spread, right? And then it will create hot spots and dark spots under the eyes, etc. So look for diffuse light. If you are like sticking to I would say natural light photography. Otherwise, try spot metering some occasions, see if that helps you. There is something known as exposing for to the left. So I would suggest you also Google that a bit. It is about the histogram and how you can maybe put the histogram to the left a bit to get more details when you edit it. So I would suggest these 3 things. Also, I would really suggest that try using a flash. It is not as complicated as it seems. Or even a reflector, right? In this case, both of the husband was actually holding a reflector also. So what was happening is the flash was hitting them. So if you see the lights here, right? So the flash was hitting them from here. It was bouncing up light here, right? And it seems complicated, Subodh, but once you start actually doing it, it is not at all complicated. Get a cheap flash which works with your camera. Get a reflector. Reflector is any, like a thermocol stick, some reflective paper on it. That's your reflector. Even if you don't have the flash, the reflector will take sunlight and reflect it up. So, you could explore all those options. Look at exposure compensation, look at spot metering, look at exposing to the left, look at diffuse light, and the sure shot way, right? For example, when I'm shooting with a customer, I don't want to have a situation where it is like I'm taking chances, then I would go with a flash and a reflector.
Great. This really helps. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that is about it.
Okay.
I will share my details are shared. So if you guys have any other questions, you can always reach out, or you can reach out via Happy to Help. That's also fine. I think you're already over time, so I'll hand it over to Ganesh to quickly go through the
Sure. Thank you so much,
platform.
Atul, for doing this webinar. At least personally for me, it was very helpful and informative as a beginner. And I hope everybody who joined the session also might feel the same. If you guys have a couple of minutes, we really want you to take through the platform, like I said at the start of the session. So for that, I'll quickly hand it over to Om and ask him to conclude. So over to you, Om.
Yeah, thank you, Ganesh, and thank you all again for joining. I learned a lot, Atul. You can see that. Maybe my next click. So yeah, I hope you guys can see my screen. Okay. So Atul, you can see my screen.
Yes, Om, we are able to see this.
Great. So guys, we are a non-profit organization. So we are having three formats. One is Let's Talk, wherein mentor will talk to mentee one-on-one. Webinar is something which you attended just now, and open discussion is a topic. It's kind of a practice where we invite a few subject matter experts and we discuss on certain topics. These are the topics which we have started with, like you can already see on your screen. We would be adding photography here. So, and we would be adding Atul as a mentor for that. So let's say if you want to learn more from Atul, so you can just go here and click on the Atul's calendar. You would be able to see when he's available, and you can schedule one-on-one using this calendar. So it's very simple. You select a date, you select time, and you give some basic information, and then you're good to go. Also, if you think this initiative is good and you want to become part of it, then you can click this link, register with us as a mentor. We would onboard you here, and I mean, you can also help us in helping others. These are certain links. We are also, you can follow us on any of this platform. We are using Meetup also to just publish our webinar details. So you can just go through it. And if you have any feedback for us, please do write to us. So that's about it. Thank you for joining, and have a good evening and a good weekend ahead. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Om. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.